Welcome to the Business Performance Podcast, where we feature expert thought leaders and cover their best strategies, stories, and advice that you can use to successfully mature your own business performance. Now, here is your host, business coach, Henry Schneider. Hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast. And today it's my pleasure to talk with Michael Nir of Sapir Consulting. He's been involved with this for almost 16 years with Lean, Agile, and DevOps. So, Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Henry, thanks for having me.
Okay, so to put things into context, could you please just briefly describe what you do with Sapir Consulting, who your typical customers are, and the types of products and services you provide?
Sure. So I've been with Sapir Consulting for the last 16 years. I was in Israel at the time, moved to Boston 5 years ago, and I've definitely worked in many industries over the years. I started more with manufacturing, lean manufacturing, into petrochemical, then into healthcare. Today, mostly it's finance, software, hardware organizations. And the service used to be consulting. Now it's more coaching. I do enterprise agile coaching, and I help organizations make the best and get awesome results.
Okay, very good. So, quality is a pretty broad term. So what does that mean to you?
To me, so I'm Lean has been married to Six Sigma and for quite some time now. And I think you can't have one without the other. And I see, I work with development teams, and sometimes they're really pressed to deliver fast. And you can deliver a lot of crappy code fast. It's got to have inherent quality. And one of the first things I'll ask the team is, as I do these workshops, I'll ask team members, hey, what's your vision for technical excellence? And when I talk technical excellence, I usually mean quality. Where do you see yourself as a team of excellent engineers create, top-notch code that doesn't break?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you do when you're talking with teams like that and you look at their technical debt, instead of it coming down like it should, it's going the opposite direction?
Isn't that always so?
Yeah.
So it's really, the way I'm seeing it nowadays is it's about tapping into intrinsic motivation and asking the right question. And it's not just the dev team. There's usually a product owner, a business analyst, a project manager there. And I like to have them all in the room and ask the tough questions, because there are three pulls here. There's a pull to get it really fast. There's a pull to get it go, and there's a pull to make it really right. And you see this kind of a balancing act. And I see my goal is to ask the questions and decide as a team, what's the right balance for us right now? How come it's getting higher? What are metrics that can put in place to check our quality of our code quality? Things like test coverage, what does that mean for us? How do we move from manual testing to automated testing? There are a lot of behavior changes that occur as you ask these questions. What my biggest aha moment in the last 2 years was, so my days of coding have long gone. I haven't done a lot of that years ago. And I think the biggest aha I had working with several software organizations in Boston is that engineers coming out of school, they know how to code well, usually. Mm-hmm. They don't understand what does it mean to manufacture software. It's not the same thing. You can create great code and have lousy software manufactured. We think about it as a factory, even though I'm kind of hesitant to use that metaphor, and yet there is a gap. Senior engineers understand what is high quality software, and that's not the same as creating great code. And the gap is the quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been a problem for decades. They don't teach software engineering, they teach tools.
Yes. And they teach coding, right? They teach how do you code, and it's really on the dev to figure out how to work around and to learn to be a better dev. And not all of them are even able easily to do that. It's hard.
Yeah. So when you look at the technical debt rising, what is like the greatest cause of that happening?
So it's funny. I was just posting today on LinkedIn on the latest book by the guy who wrote the Phoenix Project, and he's just released a Unicorn Project. This is Gene Keane. He's like the DevOps guru, and I didn't like that book that much. I thought it was somewhat shallow. Regardless, I was quoting Seth Godin, like the marketing guru, and he'd written like half a year ago that all software is held together with I'm quoting, with patches, shortcuts, and stuff. Don't be surprised, expect it. At some point, you'll need to take a deep breath and pay a bunch of money to start fresh. And then the very next day, there will be paper clips and string accumulating again. That's how it works. And it's a miracle that it works at all. And I just love that, because tech debt is part of doing business. Mm-hmm. And there is this healthy balance between how much do we accrue tech debt and how much are we paying off of it. That's like, and there's no right and wrong answer, just there is this balance between the team wanting to do it right, the architecture that needs to be in the right place. And if you look at all the big names out there, Google, Netflix, Microsoft, they all had these moments where they looked at this monolith and it's like, holy moly, what are we going to do now? How are we going to start pay the piper? What does that mean for us? And I see a lot of software organizations working with now that's been in the business for the last 8 years, and they're at this point. And they have to make this decision. Do we go after enterprise customers? And if we do, our patchy monolith legacy that we've built in the last 8 years, they've been around only 8 years. They already have this like huge tech debt, and it's just part of doing business.
Yeah. Well, part of it too is not spending enough time figuring out what is the problem you're trying to solve and get the requirements down. You just say, okay, there's that myth of Agile. We don't need no stinking requirements. Let's just go off and write code and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's one of my concerns of the misunderstanding of agility as, hey, let's just code and I have one of the executives, they're asking me, hey, we want to be more efficient, heads down code, heads down. And I think that's the wrong understanding of agility. I see that in a lot of places. And without understanding that it really is a balance, and it really is communication. So off the bat, I had a meeting yesterday with a client downtown Boston, and they were asking me, hey, what do we with tech debt? I said, well, normally what teams do is they have like an 80-20 rule. 80 will do for feature, 20% will be for tech debt. And that's a conversation with the product owner with business. If you don't pay it like small chunks up front, you're going to be really hurting 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road. And there's just no way around it, because tech debt accumulates as you do business.
Right. And like you're saying too, if it keeps getting patched, then you have underlying architecture problems that limit what you can or cannot do. And now you're stuck with having to be faced with, do we throw it all out and start over again from scratch?
Yes, and that's always a problem. I think that it is exacerbated by the fact that business doesn't understand that. It's hard for them to envision. So in lean manufacturing, it's just easy to see the tech debt. It lies in like huge columns in inventory, and you got spaghetti-like movements with all the conveyor belts and shuffling and moving around. As you see the tech debt in industry, in manufacturing, you don't see it in software. It's very hard it took me about 5-6 years to really understand what that means to have inventory levels and tech debt in software. It's just it's not tangible. You can't describe it. You can't describe it to business in a way they'll understand it. It's very hard for them.
Yeah, and there's still that mystique that, it's software. It's easy to fix. You just write some code and you're done.
Right. And to an extent, that's true. You can do a patch on a patch, and you can do something that's very shaky, and you can add another layer, and you can do a quick fix. And I think that's the flexibility in software. However, at some point, it'll just blow up in your face. And it always happens in the worst moment.
So what are some of the other misconceptions out there when it comes to software and Agile?
It's a great question. So first of all, like the most common one is that people think that Agile is just running a bunch of, they call them ceremonies. I call them events. They think that that's Agile, and that can be further from the truth, right? it reminds me of I read the Toyota Kata by Mike Rother, and he tells of this story where a group of Japanese executives from Toyota were visiting one of the bigger auto manufacturing in Detroit, and the U.S. executives were so hyped. Hey, look, we have Kanban here, and it works. And the Toyota executive like, yeah, that's interesting, but they were very thrilled and they didn't understand why. And I think organizations think, hey, let's do Kanban, right? We have a board and we put some items on it, and voila, we've improved. And that's just the starting of the process. Whether it's Scrum, whether it's Kanban, whether it's any other agile tool, technique, or method, it's the starting point for a conversation. It makes things more visible. The question is, what do you do with this visibility? It's not like a silver bullet. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I'll have. I'll go in an organization, I'll train them in Agile. Oh, now they're saying, oh, now we're Scrum. No, it's where the coaching starts. It's having those difficult conversations about, all right, how can we improve? And the improvements are not easy. It's just that it's so visible now that it's very hard to hide beneath the traditional project management practices when you do agility right.
Yeah. And the other thing too, is that it takes a lot more discipline and being structured to do this correctly than people think too.
Yes. They think, oh, we'll take, like, send people on a Scrum Master training, a certified Scrum Master. We send our project managers to be certified Scrum Master. They're back in business. No, now you're Agile. Right now, everybody's Agile, and that's really a big misconception. I talk a lot about the three fundamentals of agility. There's an element of team agility, there's an element of product agility, there's an element of technical agility, and they all have to coincide. Most organizations, the mistake they make is they focus on the team agility. They do a lot of rah, they print those t-shirts, they have hugging sessions. And now, again, I'm for that, right? I'm not against. It's okay to hug one another, to have beers together. I think it's really important. That's required. That's not enough. There has to be, along the way, the discussion about technical and quality excellence in agility, and there has to be a deep discussion about product agility as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've gone into organizations and they say, we're not Agile, we're Agile-like. And it's like, okay, they're using JIRA, something like that. And we have stand-up meetings, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, JIRA has definitely been interesting impact on the market. People talk about tickets, and I joke. I say, well, tickets you get from an officer, a cop. You don't manage tickets. It's very hard for them to wrap their heads around that.
Yeah, I had a client several years ago that wasn't doing Agile at all, but they had JIRA, and they weren't using it properly. You couldn't trust any of the information that was in there at all. But they bought it and they were using it. It was driving me crazy.
Yeah, that same client yesterday, we spent 2 hours to just discuss, and they've been doing Agile for 3 years. The first time we sat together as a team, and I was helping them, coaching them to discuss the right levels of things that they're in their backlog. Just that was a 2-hour conversation about what are the things that we're working on. Like, is this? Is it a story? Is it a bug? It was a 2-hour conversation for them.
Wow. Yeah, and that goes back to the product owner. Whoever writes those stories has to have a very clear vision of what you're going to build, so then you can hand it off to the DevOps team so they can start implementing all this stuff.
Yeah, the dev teams, definitely, for sure.
Okay. So what's the biggest number one challenge that you see clients facing with business performance today?
Wow, it's a tough one. And I think it's, so if we go to, you've asked me before about, before we started, you asked me about the 3 things that I've been, my epiphany, and I shared with you in the last half year, I've seen, I've consolidated around 3 things. It's the ability to do something that is simple. We can talk more about that later. It's the ability to do something that's scalable, and it's the ability to lead something from the inside out rather than outside in. And I think whatever you do, it can be Agile, it could be any change that you're leading. You have to have these 3 building blocks, and that's where organizations struggle. First, off the bat, they just make it too complex. So most organizations adopting agility, they think that they can do everything at once, and They just have solutions that are too complex, and they take them as a mandate. They tell it the process change. The process changes usually fail because it's hard to get teams buy-in. So that's like the number one failure. Oh, we're going to have a big process change. The teams don't see the benefit of that. These are all knowledge workers, and they find ways to work around the process, and you don't really get the benefit you wanted. So that's like number one biggest.
Yeah, see what you need there, you need somebody as a culture change person to go in there and say, okay, let's talk about this. Why don't you think this is worthwhile to do? What are your problems with this? And if you can't get anybody to agree that it's worthwhile doing, what's the point in trying it? You throw it away and do something else instead.
It's, again, reminds me, yesterday I was sitting with a DevOps guy who manages a team of about 6. And he was saying, Michael, we do Kanban. Let's look at our Kanban process. It was just him and me. And I said, well, number one, I think we need the team here. Mm-hmm. And number two, let's say we sit down now for half an hour and we say, hey, let's do 1, 2, 3. You're going to show it to the team. And they'll probably say, more meetings, a change here, change of the process. I said, that's not tapping their intrinsic motivation. Mm-hmm. And we spent some time talking what might. And I said, well, the easiest first step is how much of your work is planned work compared to ad hoc interrupts. And he's like, I don't know. And I said, well, isn't that an interesting place to start experimenting and figure you're doing Kanban, you're not doing it very well. You want to tweak your Kanban. Let's work the other way around. Let's ask ourselves, what's the problem that we're seeing that you're trying to solve? Rather than, and I love this quote that let's fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. Kanban is the proposed solution. What's the real problem you're seeing here? The problem is you have like work streams. One is like planned work that you hardly you don't really touch. There is planned work that's been changed throughout like a week, and then there's like bugs, and there is immediate ad hoc fixes. Are these your 4 buckets? You're like, yeah, these are kind of our 4 buckets. And I asked them, can you guess how much you're spending on each? Yes, let's do a benchmark. And then let's find out, let's figure out, let's measure this. I don't know how to measure. I said, aha, great. If we can figure out how you'll measure, that's halfway to solution. So let's focus on the problem of the interrupt work that you have without talking about Kanban. And I think that's where teams are missing the essence of what does it mean to own a change and to kind of be curious about the problem.
Yeah, and it comes down to, we're dealing at the root level with engineers who like to solve things. They rather come up with a solution than a problem statement. And I'm seeing a whole lot of posts on LinkedIn here with all this cool technology, and I figure this is a solution looking for a problem. Nobody wants this. We got like artificial, coming up with avatars. Samsung just had this word, artificial humans. Why on earth would you want to talk to a computer when you can talk to a live person? So it's like, what problem are they trying to solve? They're solving an interesting engineering issue or thing, but it has no practical application.
Yeah, I was just reading the book by Mick Kirsten, Project to Product, and he was talking about that there is like this Cambrian explosion now of all these solutions, and some of them just will not last. And there'll be like this huge extinction phase that we'll probably be seeing in a while. And then out of it will emerge technologies that will win. It's too early to say which ones they are. And it had made some really smart observations about that. And that's true, right? Engineers like to solve. And a lot of these processes are about, hey, let's sit down and figure out, are we solving the right thing? How do we measure what is the right thing to solve? How do we measure if we're solving it?
Yeah, and that kind of relates to with Eric Ries and the Lean Startup. This whole thing is, with looking at the wrong data, the vanity metrics. Hey, we're signing up people left and right. We got 1 million people downloading our app. Nobody's using it, but we got 1 million people out there. That's look at the wrong stuff.
Yeah. I have a friend here who has been using it. He's a startup. He's a founder, been around for 10 years. Haven't been able to move the needle. He has like 5 million signups, but nobody bought his startup because it's a vanity metric. It's not a revenue metric, right? Out of the 5 million signups, maybe 250,000 are actually using, and maybe only 50 or 100,000 are using it weekly or daily.
Yeah.
So yeah, the vanity metrics, Eric Ries's vanity metrics are a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like you can get all, and you don't want to know the other stuff because that's just going to shoot you down.
Yeah. A workshop, another client of mine, about hypothesis-driven development.
Mm-hmm.
How do we call out the experiments to see that there's any merit in what we're developing? And these were very smart engineers, I tell you. And for some of them it was a first. It was like, you're interested about the outcomes, not the output. That's interesting. It's first for me. And it's so, for me, it's so foundational of what I do. I was surprised that for them, being engineers that are told, hey, do this, do that, they do this and they do that. They don't start asking the questions. How can I put a metric? How can I see if I can change? What is the one metric that matters? Even to fall back on Eric Ries, what is the one metric that matters? Do we move that needle? How can we create small experiments to see if we're heading in the right direction, rather than spend 4 months to create this amazing feature and then there's no traction, nobody uses it.
Yeah, and are you making progress? Have you broken anything else around it? Where are you in your ecosystem for your company? Yeah.
And I think it's not just engineers. It's like everybody likes to think in the big solution, hand it over to the next team. The next team refines it, hands it over to the further downstream, and then takes 4 or 5 months, easily to get something out the door in a medium-sized company.
Yeah. Well, I was very pleased to see that Eric was a proponent of the scientific method. And that's the difference between engineers and scientists. Engineers are practical. They never learn the scientific method. And it's so simple to do.
Yes. Yes, and I think it's not ingrained in how we think about results, and it's not ingrained about how we teach in schools, definitely not in colleges, and it's not what we motivate and what we kind of find relevant and work. So we don't put motivate bonuses for people to do experiments.
Yeah, that's true. And you get punished for failed experiments as opposed to getting rewarded because you learned something.
Yeah, that learning, that validated learning is such a big thing, and it's such a counterculture to what's happening in many organizations, right? It's like when you learn something you validated something and it was invalidated, you just saved a lot of money, and people don't see it that way. You just saved a ton of money of development and engineering that otherwise you would have spent like half a year to a year. You paid knowledge workers a bunch, and you didn't get a lot of no output of that.
Yeah. So, Michael, what are some of the common fears about Agile and trying to address this type of innovative culture we're coming up with now?
I think it's control. It's the control thing. Another client that was running a workshop in December, and they don't have Scrum Master, says that, hey, the team should self-select Scrum Master. And the end of the first day, the VP of engineering kind of pulls me aside. He says, look, I think it's okay. Do you really think that the teams can self-select the Scrum Master? And I said, of course. These are smart people. They can self-select someone. And he said, so what if it's the wrong person? I said, well, we got to trust them. We got to let them lead. We got to believe that they know what to do better than what we can do. And it was so hard for him. He's a great guy. It's so hard for him to accept the fact that we're putting trust. And if it fails, maybe we're wrong. Maybe for 2 months they got a horrible Scrum Master, and we let the team work through that. And through working through that, they become excellent.
Yeah. Yes, that continuous improvement feedback loop.
Yep.
And
let the team own the decision and learn through the decision. Yeah.
So how do you get people over the hump, get past those fears so they can actually move forward?
Oh, that's a great question. I've been noodling on that for a long while, and the solution I've found about a year ago is I phrase, and it's just me. It's like, we phrase these as experiments. Hey, let's experiment with that now for a 3-month period. Meet every month or 2 weeks, and do lessons learned, a retrospective. Let's learn by doing. It's completely different than what I've done in the past. In the past, like 10 years ago, I was I was a big thing with project management offices. I was manning project management offices in Israel and Europe. I was helping them out. I was doing analysis. I came up with this solution, and that didn't work. Like the PMO was happy. I got paid. It didn't have an impact to delivery. And I really shuffled. I really redid what I've done in the past. I learned what I learned. And that means I've started thinking about even the solutions I will bring forth. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Let's experiment. Let's run it as an experiment. Let's take a project that's really important and see if we can adopt a more agile pattern of delivery, and do that over a 2-month, 3-month period, and see what we learn. And some of the learnings will probably refute some of our initial hypotheses, and that's okay.
All right, so let's talk about the retrospectives. I know you've posted a couple of videos out there on YouTube about it. And what I've seen in the past is that with the retrospectives, people just socialize all this stuff, and then they throw it away, and they keep doing what they've done before. So it's kind of like Einstein's definition of insanity. So
you can't be, it can't be more. It's like you hit nail on the head. That's exactly what happens, and it's a recurring pattern. I don't know why that happens. I have a lot of assumptions. However, the end result is the most important ceremony or meeting, if you will, of Scrum, which is a retrospective. Do everything else, do horrible. Just do a retrospective once every 2 weeks. If you do it and you really do it well, you'll improve everything else. Without a retrospective, you're stuck in the middle. You'll never be able to improve. I don't know why it happens. Teams skip on retrospective. A friend of mine just tweeted me this morning. He says, Michael, we kind of skip the retrospective. We do it with planning. 10 minutes we talk. They don't really use it. And I think it's a mix of you're right. I just started posting about that a month and a half ago on YouTube. People can subscribe to the channel. Every couple of days I talk about why our retrospectives go awry. I use a different word over there. And there's like a recurring pattern. We play too many games. We try to think it's a social thing. We don't see it as a very rigorous, experiment-driven way for team improvement. We see it as something, hey, let's sit down together. Let's talk about it. I had a team that says, hey, they said they do a 2-column thing, plus minus. Give me one word that was good. And people just, blurt out, happy, fast, and so on. Give me one word that's bad, and they'll do the same. Where's the continuous learning? How is that operational?
Yeah, that doesn't do you anything. The way I would do it is you ask 3 questions. What worked well? What didn't work well? What can we do better next time? And you just go around the room until everybody's exhausted. And then you take that information and you make changes based upon it. You just don't socialize it.
Yeah, and I think the next step is usually take too much on and then they get tired. So they need to do dot voting. Hey, what's the most important thing? And then they need to huddle for at least 20 minutes in smaller teams and come up with a list of concrete steps of how to improve that. But that's not enough. That's not still the retro. Then they need to identify the metric they're going to change using this new approach. They need to have a benchmark of where they were before they started. And then they need to make an assumption. How is this new process going to impact that metric? And then they need to measure. That is continuous improvement and how you really want to use a retrospective. Everything else is just people blurting out ideas and doing this, doing that. It's almost like a drunken walk.
Yeah, and otherwise you get the same things every 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And then people figure, oh, there's no point even contributing anymore.
It's a bitching session, right? Yeah. It's sometimes it's good, go to the bar, have some beer, say this is not working, everybody doesn't like me, nobody helps us, blah, blah, blah. That's not retrospective. That's not continuous improvement.
Okay, so let's think about, we talked about this before we started, but what defining moment occurred for you over your life that led you to say, I gotta be a consultant for Agile and DevOps, etc.?
Yes, you've asked me, and it took me a minute to think about it. I think it's like 8 years ago, or 6 to 8 years ago, I noticed that I can come up with a great solution that I think is great, and then I popularize that with the client, and maybe I present it really well. However, number one is the implementation is where you'll find the hurdles. And number two, maybe I'm wrong. Let's say I'm wrong 50% of the times, right? That's a good rate to be right 50% of the time, the solutioning for problems. Where I found that consulting doesn't really, you do a copy accept from different consulting gigs, and it doesn't necessarily solve the problem for the client. And it's much more about working with my customer and thinking together about the problems, following up the problem, discussing the problem, identifying what it is, putting metrics out there and experimenting. This rigorous scientific method of identifying root causes, doing short experiments, and getting the learning fast is the biggest aha I've had about 6-8 years ago. And it changed how I interacted with my clients.
Yeah, so that just kind of turned your whole approach around.
Yes, for sure. I don't come anymore with saying, you got to do this. This is the right solution. If you just adopt Agile and Scrum, you will see the light, and you get divine intervention, and you're released much faster, and all your problems will be solved.
Yeah.
And I just don't do that. And in the past, I was more like married to. I went to the organization. I said, like, in 10 minutes, you can see in manufacturing what's the problem. You can probably see it fast. What's the problem? Many times. However, a guest for a day sees all the problems, and then they leave, and it's like there's not really a lot of impact when you do it that way. So nowadays, I'm not very convicted any longer. Maybe it's also growing up. I'm not convicted. It's like, that's the right solution. Do this, and you'll succeed. You got to embrace this. And because I'm not married to any tools, then I don't have a problem being more hesitant to say, that will be the right solution. It's more about, let's explore together what it might be the right solution. We can identify patterns and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's going from the one true way to actually working with, okay, what is your problem? Let's jointly figure out how to solve this.
Yeah, and Agile nowadays, it's like the same thing that we had in the 90s with Lean. And it's like, it's the truism, the wording, the labels change. The truism stay the same. It's about collaboration. It's about visual management. It's about good communication. It's just we label these things differently. Now it's called Agile.
Yeah. Okay. So in a similar vein, could you share an experience you had over your life, maybe even growing up, that still influences how you approach business today?
Curiosity. So I think I'm really curious to see what's going on in an organization. For me it's understanding the interlocking, like the mechanism that are at play, where you create this like Yuval Noah Harari says, the organizations are a made up thing, right? There's no such thing as Coca-Cola. There's no such thing as Microsoft or Google. These are made up gods, made up, divinities, and it doesn't really exist. And you go into this narrative called Google, or narrative called whatever my client is, and you start looking at the patterns and how the vision is impacted and how the people work and what the culture is that emerges. And for me, it's just exciting, and I'm always very curious to see and trying to understand, what is it that I'm seeing, what am I experiencing, and that's kind of the thing that's been leading throughout my life. I think it has a lot to do with my Gestalt upbringing, Gestalt studies over the years.
Yeah, and you're right. It's the culture. I mean, it's people. How people work together, and it's like the guy at the top or the woman at the top leads. And maybe they may be not even leading, but they set the tone for the whole organization. And if you don't have that right mindset, everything else will just
and you'll sit with the head honcho, whoever they may be, and you sit and you talk to them, and you get a certain vibe, and then you look at the culture, and it's totally different than what that vibe from that person is. And that always drives me like mad. I was like, what's going on? Like, this guy, I've worked with him, I've met him, and so when you look at the behavior when he's or her is not around, they're not around. Why is this happening? Why is this contradictory to what they are saying as a vision and the culture they're envisioning? What happens now when they're not around on mid-level management and on the frontline guys and gals? What's going on there? How does that connect? What happened? Where's the loss in translation? These things always really make me curious to understand better.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the disconnect, because you got basically got somebody in an ivory tower, and they say go off and do good things and let me know when the money starts coming in. And really, what you need is you have to have some kind of governance interaction from the top all throughout the entire management chain to really keep track of everything that's going on. Otherwise, people will do the work. They'll try to do the best job they can, but if nobody's paying attention to them, then it decays. And
yeah, entropy wins. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true about Agile as well, right? We think, oh, once you start with Agile, it will work to perpetuity. It doesn't work that way. It decays. Once you don't have mechanisms in place, you don't have coaching and so on, you leave a place, entropy wins. People will go revert to their silos, will go do their own work, they'll flip work over the wall, they don't really care about the results of their work. So I think that's very true what you said.
Yeah, and they're going to just make it easy as possible to get their job done.
Yeah.
And not even pay attention to how it impacts somebody else in the next
downstream. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so let's see. Okay, so in having worked in this area for a while now, and since Agile's been around for quite some time, what do you see as the next neat thing from development coming down the pipe?
Truthfully, I'm not sure now any longer. I'm a safe program consultant. I invested a lot of my time in scaled agile framework, and I thought that's going to be the next big thing for scaling agility. I'm not too convinced any longer. It's an interesting way to scale. I think they've gone and made it too complex for companies to really adopt it well. Now they have, say, version 5. I talk a lot about scalability, and I used to think everybody's going to adopt SAFe and it's going to be the next big thing. I'm not so positive any longer. I thought the same about DevOps. From a different perspective, I think DevOps is definitely getting a lot of traction. What I find is that business relegates DevOps to, hey, it's the IT thing that people do with builds and CI/CD pipelines and AWS. That's DevOps. So while the DevOps community really wants to push it up into business, so I don't see it happening that much. Who knows? This concept of business agility is getting a lot of traction. It's hard to say what's in it. So what is business agility? Is it marketing adopting Agile? Is it engineering now adopting Agile and doing scaled Agile? Is it the IT folks downstream doing DevOps? It's really hard to say at this point, I think, what's going to happen. There's even arguments about, has Agile crossed the chasm? Is it the ubiquitous way to manage projects? And some places I'm still seeing traditional project management, and it's more places than I would have imagined.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it even in terms of like Agile systems engineering, which I'm not real certain what that means, but it's you're taking it out of the software realm when you.
They slap Agile to everything now.
Yeah.
All right, so everything now, everybody wants to be Agile. They kind of figure out, hey, let's do a stand-up, we're Agile. It's hard to say how it's going to shape up and what are the next thing. I see a lot of interest now in flow, and I think flow it has a lot of merit, and focusing on flow and kind of even going back to lean manufacturing and doing value stream mapping, and they connect it to DevOps. Maybe there is some. Definitely, if you go into lean software development, Mary and Tom Popadick, they talk about flows in software development 15 years ago. And maybe now it's catching on more about how do you look at the complete value cycle of delivery and bring the business in to truly align to business agility and getting fast feedback.
Okay. So what about, we haven't really talked about, but AI, ML, deep learning, how does that fit in? Because a lot of that's kind of, it's way out there, and they expect it to really take off in the next several years.
Um, I had a prediction that completely was misplaced about 10 years ago, that by 2020, we're not going to have all those cobwebs of software development, Seth Godin is saying, that software will write itself. And we won't have all those pesky software engineers with their headphones on, and and thinking they're the smart world, creating code and then being upset that it's not being pushed down and delivered. I thought by 2020 a lot of those problems will be, because we have machine learning and AI will be solved. So a lot of the code that we're seeing, and machines will be able to look at legacy code and simplify it. Machines will be able to kind of deconstruct complex logic that's been built in systems, green screen systems from the 70s. And I was totally wrong. So I still think that if you look in the future, the same way you're going to have driverless cars at one point, I think all those software problems will just have to have computers and machine learning and truly software writing software, and being able to solve all the problems. But right now you'll have people trying to debug a certain release, and it takes them 2 weeks and are not able to find it. I think I was assuming it'll be over and I will have to look for a different job. I'm happy it hasn't occurred so far. It doesn't seem that it's on the horizon. I think that's the biggest holy grail, especially for business. They'll be asking just, hey, create this for me, and something will happen in the background, and it's created in like a day. You don't have to have this rigorous process of product and user experience and UI, and then figure all this complex front end and back end, and then going through a release and a legacy system that takes a month and a half to release, and a mess and debugging, and you have 50 different releases at any given time, and you have 40 different software branches, and you try to integrate them and everything breaks, and you got to teach people how to do that right. And there's a pushback. So I thought we won't have it in 2020, and I was horribly wrong.
Maybe by 2030.
Hard to say.
Yeah. So, Michael, what does success look like for Michael Nir?
Oh, wow. You didn't prep me for this question. So success in my current, what I'm doing currently, is definitely being able to create collaboration in an organization across silos. When this happens, I'm really happy. When I'm able to facilitate an interaction that people start talking. It's 2020 and people still don't talk. We have all those great tools. We have Zoom we're using now. We have all those amazing tools out there, collaboration tools, efficiency tools, or whatever, you name it. And still people aren't talking to one another, and it's a big, big mess. And it just drives me crazy. So when I'm able to create some sanity in this craziness, that is for me success nowadays, for sure.
Okay, great. Now, what are, for you from a consulting and coaching perspective, what are your top 3 business challenges or concerns?
Is that related to what you asked me before?
No, it's slightly different.
I'm like, is this a lead-on question? I'm not sure.
Yeah. From a business perspective, what are you concerned about? What are your top 3 concerns?
So I'm definitely concerned from a business perspective, when is the next downturn going to happen? Mm-hmm. Right? That's always been, I've been doing this now for 16 years. I went through several downturns. I don't like them. They're always a pain. So from my own business perspective, like, excuse me, my own business perspective is, when is it gonna hit? I think the next thing is the speed of change of what I do. I probably had to change what I've done every 3 years in the last 18 years. I don't know how long I'm able to keep up with that. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge concern. I'll give you an example. I used to have a newsletter. Newsletters, I think, are passé. That's nobody reads them. So now I'm trying this short 2-minute videos on YouTube. I'm using them on LinkedIn, right? I didn't use LinkedIn 15 years ago. Right. I started using about 10 years ago. I didn't do short videos on YouTube in the past. I had this huge email list, didn't provide any value. So the rate of change in the adaptation that both myself and the organization have to go through is just staggering. And that means that in about 2-3 years, I probably won't be talking about Agile much. If I have like, I like, and rationally, I think I would, right? However, if I look at the pattern, I probably won't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, I've been posting these podcasts out, they go like almost an hour, but then I'm cutting it up in little smart snippets and posting those out. At least those people are watching those.
Yeah, I went to the National Speaker Organization in New England this Saturday, and this guy talking about podcasts, and he was sharing, like, we didn't do podcasts 15 and 20 years ago. People are still doing newsletters, and I don't know the impact of those, right? Podcasts is where it's at, and it's almost like it seems that podcasts just voice, unless it's someone who's like a really big guru or has this amazing podcast. If you don't get the video, I find it somewhat boring. I don't know. That's just for me. And 45 minutes, I hope you cut it to a lot of small snippets, because I don't have the patience for that. I hardly have the patience for listening to myself for more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's your people's attention times. You got to get in there. Something short, a minute, somebody will pay attention. But it's 45 minutes, you're who knows what's going to happen there.
Yeah, that's why I've seen the 2-minute videos or a minute and a half about retros kind of hit the sweet spot. Like, people like them, but I assume maybe they'll watch them while they're taking a bathroom break in a meeting.
Yeah.
Hey, let's look at this, 45, 50 seconds and see what he has to say. So that really consumed well. I don't know what's going to be next, right? Hard to say.
Okay. All right. So what's the most important question people should be asking when they consider using you for a coach or a mentor?
Do we want to get results?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. I think we've seen commoditization of Scrum Master, Agile coaching, and agility in the last 5 years. My friends and my network has definitely been hit by that. And you can buy nowadays Scrum Master by the pound. You just don't get any benefits, right? You said you're paying someone to manage your meetings. What's the benefit of that? So what I really bring with me is clients that want to move the needle to get results, and they've been burned by bad Agile before and been messed up with that. That's where I'll step in. So do we want to get results, or do we want to just pay the piper and adopt Agile?
Okay. All right. So now you said you kind of reinvented your approach every 3 years. So you probably do a lot of soul searching. So if you had to start things over again from scratch, what would you change and what would you continue doing the same?
I wish I've known about learning from the back of the room 15 years ago and 10 years ago when I was touring Europe and delivering traditional project management training 5 days and 3 days in a row. And I went to like 70 different European locations. I wish I knew how to structure the material rather than do death by PowerPoint, which I never really liked. However, had I known training from the back of the room back then, had I known about the other thing I really like is liberating structures back then, I've used some of that, but not too structured. I wish I knew that 10 and 15 years ago. Made my life much easier, and my success would have been much faster.
So if somebody doesn't know what you're talking about, what do you mean by liberating structures?
Liberating structure are micro, that's how they define them. So these are micro facilitation techniques that make sure that in an interaction, there's much more collaboration and fast communication and feedback compared to the way we traditionally run meetings. Mm-hmm. So you can look it up. There's even an app. It's all for free. I'm always happy to teach. So if people are interested in that, I'm always happy to facilitate a workshop about liberating structures. Like all those small things you can do at meetings that you're totally oblivious to that gets people to work really together. Just look it up, liberating structures. I find them very useful. Been using the last 2 years or so.
Okay. All right, Michael, we could just keep going on, but we're running out of time here, and I want to be respectful of your time and day. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about you and even talk to you about coming to help them out?
Well, sure. So my website is michaelnir.com. My LinkedIn is the same. My email is michael@michaelnir.com. And I'm more than happy to do talking, workshops, coaching, and any of the things we've been discussing, and really focus on results.
Okay. Well, great. I really enjoyed talking with you today, Michael, and I like your advice about being simplify, make it scalable, make it soakable. This is just a wonderful views of things. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Henry. And just remind everyone that YouTube channel, feel free to register and subscribe on that, because I'm posting really good stuff several times a week on how to make retrospectives shine. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Business Performance Podcast with your business coach, Henry Schneider. For more episodes and business strategies, please visit welcome.ppqc.net/blog. That's www.welcome.ppqc.net/blog. And remember to subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. Thank you.